Hello, I'm Mimma Viglezio. I'm a creative consultant and a broadcaster and an editor. And I'm here today to have a chat, a little duet with the wonderful Vanessa Friedman, who is the fashion director of the New York Times. Hi, Vanessa, how are you?
Hi, good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. We haven't bumped into each other since Fashion Week has been cancelled, so it's been a long time. We're not traveling.
I miss you.
Yeah, me too. But I'm looking forward to our discussion. I have so much I want to discuss, but of course I have to be conscious of time. And I've received many questions from students and people that are very interested in knowing your point of view on things. So I will try to put most of them into our discussion because mostly are following the theme I wanted to chat about anyway. And then in case at the end I will ask you a few directly. But let's start briefly from you and your career because everybody seems to be so interested about your success. So tell me, how does someone become the fashion editor of the Financial Times, which the word says is financial, and how does someone then go on and become probably the most feared fashion critic in the industry?
Yeah. I am not scary. I've said this a lot, I think, and we've probably talked about this. I really ended up in fashion completely by mistake. I never planned it. I didn't study it in school. I didn't study journalism. I didn't go to art school. If you had told me I would be doing this when I was probably the age of all the kids watching this, I would have, laughed in your face and said something rude. But I turned out through fate or luck or dumb luck in a job that I absolutely love. I studied history at Princeton and I got into magazines and I thought I would do a lot of writing about arts and culture and worked at Vanity Fair and the New Yorker and then did some arts writing at Vogue, moved to England when I got married and was freelancing and sent a letter to the FT. Because I heard they were looking for freelancers, and the woman then who was running the How to Spend It section, because they didn't have a fashion section, saw I had worked at Vogue, assumed that meant I knew about fashion, and called me and said, will you write about boots? And at that stage in my life, sitting in a loft in Kentish Town, I was like, I would write about tire treads if you paid me. And that is how it all began.
That's fantastic. But it's very interesting when you say I never planned it, because I didn't either. I studied philology and I wanted to be an academic, and then life does things that bring you into fashion, and then it's actually interesting, and then we got stuck. But I also think that we have, and you do certainly, because as you know, I am an avid reader or whatever you write, a vision which is a little bit more external, a little bit less biased about the merits of the industry, and a little bit more critic. Right?
Well, I think I got very lucky because when the FT finally decided to have a fashion editor in 2003, they'd never had one before. They didn't even have a fashion page before. They included fashion reporting in this kind of bucket of How to Spend It, which also included vases and gardening at a certain point. But they finally realized that this was a sort of interesting industry. It was a big industry. There was a lot of money involved, and actually readers maybe cared about this. So they thought they'd have a fashion editor, and I think I was the only writer they remembered, honestly.
What do you mean the only writer that remembered?
Because I'd been freelancing for them, and they were like, well, how are we going to find a fashion editor? And I just happened to be there. I think I sent them a letter just at that moment.
That's a little bit humble. Probably they also saw some potential. But once a few years ago, you gave me a fantastic anecdote by something that happened at a meeting with reader of the FT or writers. What was that?
I mean, the whole thing. I mean, the FT was very conflicted about having a fashion editor. So they knew they wanted one, but they really didn't know what it should be or why, or feel that comfortable with it. So when I went in for my interview, for example, with Andrew Gowers, who was then the editor, who was the sort of big guy who looked a bit like Henry VIII, big sideburns. Literally, the first thing he said to me was, I never think about clothes. And I was like, interesting way to start this conversation. And I said, well, did you get dressed this morning? Did you dress yourself, And he said, yeah. I was like, you thought about clothes. And, and that's sort of always been my approach. Like, this is a subject that is one of the few universal subjects, in the world. Everyone thinks about, shelter, like how they're going to stay safe. They think about food, what they're going to put in their body, and they think about clothes, what they're going to put on their body. The rest is politics and personal taste. And that's an incredibly rich topic. Even though, for many, I'd say the first 5 years I was at the FT, people were still, saying things like yeah. FT has a fashion editor, and there would literally be emails going around the internal messaging system when we started doing show reviews that were in the first section with the arts reviews. Like, can you believe it? Like the barbarians are at the gate, the sky is falling. But I think my moment when I realized that we had kind of broken through was during one of the luxury conferences that you used to come to, that I think was the one in Switzerland. And I was sitting next to Martin Wolf, and my younger brother, who was working at a bank at UBS at the time, had come. And so Martin, who, is the chief economist for the FT, who is this incredibly serious, big brain, very scary person.
Yeah, a real intellectual of economy.
Yeah, said to my brother, so what, did you ever think your sister would end up in this job? And he said, no, not in a million years. And Martin said, well, what did you think she'd be doing? And he said, I thought she'd, go off into some sort of, I don't know, super pretentious field like philosophy or, writing about sociology and culture. And Martin looked at him and he said, well, what do you think she's doing?
That's Martin, the clever one. And it's very interesting you're saying this, because I always tell people, I think there are not many people that talk about fashion in an interesting way. It's either red carpet or celebrities or, there's fashion critics that are interesting, but I think there is a lot of anthropology and sociology and, it's such a big platform. And in the past, probably 5 years, maybe thanks to social media, it has become even more related and connected to what's happening in the street, and young people are so connected to fashion as to any other pop culture, music or TV or cinema. And so I think Marty saw it right long time ago. But what I'm also surprised is that for someone like the FT, it's such a big industry money-wise, and it was when did you say 2003? 2000.
It had just started back then, because you know, right? You were at.
Well, I was at Bulgari still in 2003 on my way to Vuitton in Paris. Yes.
But it seems so entrenched now. It seems so established, and everyone knows about these big groups and all this money. But in fact, Gucci Group was only created in 2000.
I know, but for 2003, the big conglomerate, the Arnault and Pinot and Richemont existed. And so many people already had their salaries and their livelihood in fashion. And yet it was so hard. Someone asked me once, why did you even bother to go to university to be the communication director of Bulgari? What do? You buy flowers for events? So, I've been used to this. And
well, I think there's still a misperception about it. Not so much in Europe, but certainly, in the US still, partly because luxury isn't really it doesn't have the same presence here, but LVMH, I think, is the biggest taxpayer in France.
Yeah, probably. Probably, and yet I'm not sure they pay all the taxes they should pay, so it should be even bigger. But yeah, it's interesting. But yet, here you are, and as I said, when I said the most feared person, not because I think you are unfair but because you say it as it is. And this is one thing that everybody asks me about in these questions: how can one be objective in fashion criticism where magazine platforms, newspaper, they live off advertising? And I know that you being in an American newspaper, you can't get gifts or be flown to exotic places, but still, do you have pressure from, can you say, do you have pressure from?
I'm very happy to say I have literally zero pressure. The Times does take this incredibly serious. The FT also took it incredibly seriously. There is a real wall between commercial and editorial. And I have never, I know I've written things that make our ad department less than happy because they have to go and be nice to brands that are less than happy. But it's never come back to me. No one's ever asked me not to write something. And the other thing is we actually increasingly don't live off advertising. I think there's, both for the FT and for the New York Times, there is a real possibility. I mean, I think it will absolutely be reality that, we are going to be funded by subscriptions as opposed to advertising.
So subscription will take over that amount of money that advertising was giving? Wow, I didn't know this.
Yeah. And that is what I think our business development office wants, that's where we're going to, that we will be independent of having to worry about advertising. I mean, advertising clearly is still important, and, it is great to have it. And I hope we're a vehicle for it, but it won't be something that we're dependent on.
Yeah, that's very good, because you're going to be even freer or more free than you are now. But I guess they're interested to know if you think your opinion about the objectivity of your colleagues in platforms or magazines.
I think magazines have a different, they have a different role than newspapers, and it's not really a critical role. Fashion magazines are there to be like cheerleaders for the industry, and they're not formal marketing vehicles, but they're there to support fashion and to encourage readers who love fashion to love it, as much or more. And I think newspapers are there to provide information, to be a kind of filter of all the white noise that goes on in the world, and to let readers know kind of what they need to know that day to sort of effectively go about their lives. And those are different, and therefore, writing for those different platforms requires different ways of thinking. Yeah,
absolutely. But there's also, and I see you are going also a little bit towards that. During Fashion Week, you were hosting content, video content, and I've seen you on Instagram doing live on Instagram, and which is very different probably from what you were used to do, because I guess your opinion is more, it's not that when you talk you don't think, but the writing is always different than talking, and so I guess even the New York Times has to go a little bit more towards these modern ways of discussing and offering content to their reader, or opinions.
I mean, I don't know what you think, but I feel like these are all complementary parts of a mosaic, and the goal is to fit them all together. So it's not that one replaces the other. It's not that there's no criticism that that we're still committed to. We're absolutely still committed to criticism, that is a review of a show or a review of a collection. I just did one about the Gucci miniseries
Let's go there in a second.
But I think it's also exciting that I can have a casual conversation like this with you, on Zoom or on Instagram, and people can just tune in at their lunch hour and see what we're chatting about. And, and it can make me or other writers, or consultants like yourself seem, like real people, as opposed to just kind of blank names on paper. And that's, and that's a fun way to interact with readers too.
I couldn't agree more that I'm a strong believer in things to coexist, like cinema and TV, or print and digital, or, whatever. However, I do think that now there is this run towards who's the best, one to offer stuff online, and, with COVID, where we were all in our houses, and I'm always a little bit worried about the quantity instead of quality, and so when it's too much, and it becomes like pollution for me, and so I'm always looking towards those people that have a voice that I believe in writing or in other contexts, to give me something like this. And it's not always the case, but that's just me.
I think you have to understand, I mean, it's with anything, it's with someone who wants to be a designer, someone who wants to be a writer, someone who wants to be a consultant. You have to understand why you're choosing to do something. And there has to be a reason why you're doing something on Instagram that you couldn't do in a review.
Yeah.
Or something on Zoom that you couldn't do on Instagram. And then there'll be real substance, I think, to that action or that decision or that product, because there's a reason you're choosing that platform or that technology, and it's not replicable. I think if you're just like doing it because you feel like everyone else is doing it and you have to get in there, like that's not a good reason.
Exactly. Like I think in everything, you know, like even when I advise young designer and I say, be honest and do what you really feel you should be doing. Don't do something because you think that's what we expect from you. But let's go to Gucci. So I want to talk, I mean, I was thinking about talking about Gucci, not really, I mean, will be very interesting to know what you thought, but it's not really to judge the film or the fashion in it. I am absolutely passionate about that. Big as a voice as Gucci have said, fine, we're not going to do a show, but we're going to give you something different. And then they come up with a fashion film festival, Gucci Fest, where not only they have this narrative that they bring on every day, and maybe we're going to explain a little bit more what it is if anyone still doesn't know, but also they give the platform to some new talent in an edited way. So they pick them, they decide which one have the right to be. But you know, I follow a few of these, and for someone like Bianca Saunders to be on the Gucci platform, it's gigantic. It's much bigger than anybody can imagine it is. And so for me, that's great praise to Alessandro and Marco and whoever decided to do this. And for me, it's very interesting also to see it as a slow movement towards change, you know, towards something that will happen, that will make things different. So before you telling me what you actually think about the thing, I would like to hear what you think about what I just said.
I mean, I agree. I think when, and I just wrote this, so by the time people see this, they might have seen this, read it. But when shows first went digital and we started talking about and thinking about what that could be, you know, I got really excited about the potential and the idea that this could kind of create a new form of expression, a new kind of narrative, you know, one that really was like not a perfume commercial, not a music video, not something we've already done, not a live stream of a show that, you know, happens to be in an empty room, you know, but actually something different. And I was really disappointed, largely by, you know, what happened in July. And then again, you know, a lot of what happened in September. I mean, I do think there were some interesting shorts, you know, in particularly by Tebe Mugugu and Maureen Serre, where, you know, they really created something that wasn't what we had seen before and felt new and provocative and like made me think, and also showed their clothes, and you know, I was like, and was, you know, and was the right amount of time, because the other thing is like there's a very limited sort of attention span that we all have for watching these things online. You know, but mostly it didn't feel different. It didn't feel risky, and so when Gucci announced Gucci Fest, I did, you know, I was like, finally, it has happened, you know, this idea, because I think in my head was imagining like Quibi, but, you know, like better fashion, you know, essentially like sort of mini Netflix series with super high production values and stories where the clothes kind of played a supporting role, but showed how they function in life. And you know, that seemed like what Gucci was planning to do. They had Gus Van Sant, you know, they had all these like real, like legitimate film people involved. So I got very excited. And I also agree that they, by kind of making it an umbrella under which they gathered all these kind of younger, newer designers that don't have the marketing budgets of a Gucci Fest, you know, they very brilliantly positioned themselves as this, you know, further cemented themselves as a tastemaker, you know, positioned their empire. I mean, they paid for these films, you know, it was like very beneficent, you know, and that I thought was really smart. So I was super excited to see it all.
But I'd sense a but coming.
I do think the short films worked really well, and the young designers worked really well. I loved what Bianca Saunders did, I have to say. I thought it was really charming and smart, and her clothes were perfect in that context. You know, I thought what Molola did was really interesting. I loved the Kalina Strada like video game. Which I do think is like another example of like how you can take, you know, what was starting point was their fall fashion collection, like take that and, you know, take it to a new level of interactivity, you know, because you can actually go to their website and play the video game.
Yeah.
Get like crushed by the rolling avocado.
And I thought that the young director, once again, and I go back to what you said about Digital Fashion Week, they were probably the most honest. So they're purer. They don't have the pressure that people expect. A 7-10 million production. I'm thinking about the Dior's and the Vuitton. And well, I think Nicolas did something amazing in Paris, but that's a different story. But, usually, but these young people that usually have very small means, but a lot of creativity, what they do is that they do things that look like them or look like their fashion, sound and feel like what they are. And I think I'm talking about Bianca Saunders, not only because I really love her, but I thought it was so honest. Those clothes, those men, those words, that music, that's exactly who she is. And she wasn't trying just because she got money to do this, to do something that she's not. And that comes up in all the others, from the video games to a little bit more political, a little bit less political, whatever. What I thought about, I'm going to help you here, about the Gucci film, which is not over. So we've seen 4 episodes, I think. I was trying to watch the 5th before, but it wasn't on yet.
I saw
it. Sorry?
I saw it all.
Yeah, because probably you've been sent it. I haven't. I'm not a VIP. But what I thought about the film was that it was a little bit too brainy, and I know Alessandro and I love Alessandro, and I know the Italian culture where they put too many words, too many concepts, and then for people that are not Italian and don't read the subline, it comes out a bit complicated. So if on one side I love those dialogues that didn't mean anything because I thought that was quite ironical, on the other hand, sometimes I'm like, well, come on, why are you asking me this effort? And I'm not stupid, and yet I don't get it. I have to rewatch it. I love the fashion. I always did. And you and I remember a discussion at Yom Kippur in Milan where you couldn't go to the show because it was Yom Kippur at the beginning of Alessandro. I was totally pro and you were more. So I still love his fashion and I still adore what he does. But I'm not convinced about these films. That's what I'm saying
about this film the way I feel about all his fashion, which is that I have never seen a man who needs an editor more.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
And I think Gus Van Sant is a amazing director who has had an incredibly storied career that has gone in many different directions. And so, I felt like this film this partnership, because it really seems to be a partnership between Alessandro and Gus Van Sant, it could have gone in many different directions. It could be like Good Will Hunting or Milk or My Own Private Idaho or Elephant. I mean, there's so many different kind of sides of Gus Van Sant's creative expression. But the film I think that it is closest to maybe was a film called Sea of Trees. And The Ringer, that website, once in writing about Gus Van Sant's career, describes Sea of Trees as a Hallmark card that thinks it's a haiku. And I think that's kind of where we are with this with this series. I think it was incredibly well intentioned. I think it was brave and risky, and I'm glad they did it. But 7 episodes of that film, really, that was a lot of Gucci, and it was a lot of the same mood and tenor. It doesn't have any tension. It doesn't really have a story arc. It doesn't really have any hard edges. It doesn't have that kind of emotional or sort of narrative pull that keeps you watching until the end, because you're like, what happened? The same thing happens all the time. The same way his clothes are the same. The same thing happens with his clothes all the time.
Funny enough, I thought the first episode of what I've seen, so, I haven't seen it all, but the first episode for me was probably more interesting because there was a lot of politics in it. It was all about this, Sylvia, we don't even know if she's really transgender because she refuses to be a woman or a man, whatever, but this transgender Spanish person on TV and this text about what this means for society and what it is. So I'm not going into too much detail, but that was interesting for me because, like it or not, there was a narrative that I'm interested in. And I think, again, Gucci has a big platform, and Alessandro's obviously been always drawn towards this kind of queerness that I still think needs a lot of explanation, a lot of acceptance, etc., etc. But then the next episode, I thought, oh, it's going in a different direction, or that has disappeared, or maybe I have to understand it, and I don't. So that for me was a little bit the problem. I don't dislike seeing this queer and weird fashion of Alessandro in sort of fake real life, like people, going and doing things dressed like that. I think it's quite funky and funny. And, I always tell people, if you go to a Gucci store, then you can buy anything and wear it the way you want. So that's what I like about their fashion. But again, to go back to the idea, and I think all the other big brands are like, oh my God, why didn't we do it? And I think it's fantastic that they did it, and that they added, other designers in it to show what they think it's worth following, and this is bringing me to the fact that we, and probably you too, we come more from an era of competition, and where everything was secret, and two designers didn't want to be photographed in the same room, and and now everybody is friends, and everybody collaborates, and designers are friends and supporting each other, and I like that, don't you? Don't you think?
Although I do think that the Gucci Fest, it wasn't even called Gucci and Friends Fest, right? It's called Gucci Fest. Like, this is about Gucci as the kind of feudal chieftain bringing these, young brands in. It works very much to Gucci's favor to be this beneficent. I do think it's good they're doing it, but, I don't think it's selfless.
No action is selfless, because everything is publicity. Of course, this goes in the marketing budget, So, but it's like when, a tennis tournament has the name of a brand because they pay for it all. So, this is a fest that it's paid by Gucci. It's not Gucci and Friends, because the friends didn't pay for anything. I disagree on this one, Vanessa. No, not for the sake of Gucci, for I disagree on the principle, but maybe I misunderstood.
No, I think, I think that this, what is really smart about Gucci doing this is that while it is being generous, it is also, reinforcing its own position as the kind of empire builder, and as the brand on the top of that empire. These younger brands are getting to do this because Gucci is allowing them to do it and making it possible. So, that's, it's good for everybody, but also very good for Gucci.
Yeah, I get the fact that nobody is completely pure in their actions, but am I surprised? Or, I'm a marketeer at the heart. I grew up in companies that were asking me to do things that would influence buy. So I also judge these things by that lens, and I think this is brilliant. It's a genius idea. I think it's Alessandro's, but whoever, if someone's in the marketing department or communication department came up with it, kudos.
The thing I was talking about with attention, which I would like to hear your thoughts on too, is that, I agree that Alessandro has been really sort of at the forefront of inclusivity, particularly when it comes to gender and sort of non-binary stereotypes, and like breaking through some of these walls. But, it was one thing to have the philosophers talk about this stuff, but you didn't see any of the struggles that, I think individuals who are trying to break through these barriers undergo in the world. Sylvia was like surrounded by friends and supporters and love. There isn't any kind of the harshness of reality. It was a very soft focus, kind of padded, like silk lined world, which is Alessandro's world. It's all about love and acceptance and, and friendship. But the real, the world outside isn't. And there wasn't any of that, like, difficulty.
Yeah, but that's the difference of the role of a brand that it's doing a marketing, a great one, creative and you know, and filled with generosity to others thing like this, or Steve McQueen doing a documentary about it. That would be more about the Black Lives Matters, but I mean, no other names came to me. So I think that's the difference between doing a documentary to portray the situation, to show a situation, or being a little bit political within your brand. And actually, this brings me fantastically into the other thing I wanted to discuss was, should brands be political? You know, because we have seen during last Fashion Week, digital or not, much more in Paris and New York than London, you know, a little bit different than Milan, which was not at all. But, you know, the fact that brands try to be political, and, you know, in America, it was all against Trump and, you know, and pro-vote in the election. And in Paris, it was about all the other things we've been discussing, from, you know, racism and diversity and whatever. But what do you think about that? Because some brands do it in a way that make me cringe, and it's like, you guys never done anything. And by the way, I work for you and I know how bad you are behind the scenes. And some others that, again, you know, especially the new upcoming designer do it in a much more honest way. And I think about people like Bethany Williams, who really devote, I mean, she's so young and yet she gives 20% or whatever she makes, 30% to causes for every collection, and that's for real. Or, you know, and so she has the right to talk. So what do you think about politicizing your collection or your brand?
I think right now everything is political, and, you know, and people want brands to stand for something clearly, and if that upsets some of them, that's okay. You know, I think that being wishy-washy is not really acceptable anymore. You know, but I also think if you're going to stand for something, or if you're going to sort of declare allegiance to something, you have to really, like, mean it. You know, you have to accept the kind of criticisms and the work that comes with, you know, making those kind of declarations. So, and I think you saw that a lot with the social justice movement this summer, you know, when brands were all like sticking black Instagram squares on their feeds, and, you know, and people were really like, what the hell? I mean, you know, these are brands that have no black people in positions of power, no black people on their boards, you know, and it's not, you can't just say like, oh, I'm with you. You have to actually like demonstrate commitment to understanding what that means, and, you know, and to affecting change. And, you know, I think some of them are getting there, but, you know, I still think fashion has an enormously long way to go. I think it's a really complicated question, and, you know, it's really tough and important, and, you know, companies are just starting to wrestle with it. What do you think?
Well, I couldn't agree more, you know, and I you know, my problem is that, as you know, I've worked for the biggest groups in the world, and I don't want to mention names here also, because, as I told you once, the day I really talk, then I will have to change job, because, you know, you publish that book and then you disappear. But I also been behind the scene, you know, I fought for some things, and I've seen how it didn't work. And also, I do believe that, for instance, here now comes to me, apart from the political, also the greenwashing, but I also believe that being sustainable and politically fair, it's not only about doing one look in your show with a recycled fabric, but it's also human right. And human rights starts within your company, starts in the way you treat your employees, you know, the unfairness of pay within your company. How many young people that you have unpaid because they're interns and because they can afford it while some other couldn't afford it? Or do you really check your supply chain down to the last person in some countries who is not paid? So, and I know things that happen, and I know that things that happen still today inside companies that are headed by people that are loved and thought about the most sustainable and the most fair. It's not true. It's all fake, or it's mostly fake, and it still is. And so I come from too much within to be reassured. That said, I believe in the young generation, and I talk with them and I work with them and I mentor them, and I think they really believe, they are convinced that they can make a change. And so yes, I agree with you that when you post a black square, you better do something for that real, and meaning not only sending money to a charity because so people will know, but also start from within and put people of color at the top if they're worth it. I mean, if they're talented, and there's none, and there still are none. And I mean, here are two white women talking about that, but that's the reality. So I don't know if I answer, but that's what I think. And it makes me sad, and it makes me angry more than sad. Sometimes I yell at screens and TVs and articles like, that's not true. I know it's not,
Yeah, no, it was really interesting though. I had we did a Zoom at the beginning of Fashion Month with Virgil Abloh and Tory Burch and Antoine Arnaud and it was right after they had announced Kim Jones was going to Fendi, and so I asked Antoine if they had considered any designers of color for that, and he just said nope, we didn't. And I think part of it was like they had actually started that conversation probably, before the Black Lives Matter movement began, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have readdressed it. And, I think it does just reflect how hard it is to change the system and how entrenched in it, brands and companies still are.
But, someone high placed in the industry once recently said to me, what if there's no designers of colors that are worthy of that place? And I'm like, well, look harder, look deeper. But people come up with things like, there are none. But also, I don't want people to hire Virgil because they feel they have to. Because that's, maybe I'm going too far, but then sometimes I feel that some of these groups, they do things because it's cool or because they have to. And there's no, when Tebe Magugu won the LVMH award, and I followed him from before it was cool. And so I was filled with joy and love, but come on. There was no doubt that it was going to win it. They needed an African. And yes, there are some other very good African designers, especially in South Africa. But yeah, it's better than not happening. But is it honest? Do they really believe? Do they really want to now help Tebe becoming the next Kim Jones? What maybe better than me. Do they really believe? Will they?
I don't actually care if they believe it or not. I think he's talented enough to get to a level of success and has, an understanding enough of the kind of layout of the fashion landscape to get to a level of success where he's going to matter. His video during Fashion Month was fantastic. I think it was one of the best videos.
Yeah, it was one of the best.
It was so smart. For you guys, if you haven't seen it, he had found a book, a nonfiction book that was written about, kids, women mostly, who had graduated from college and become apartheid spies or spies for the apartheid government, meaning they had they'd been like red sparrowed into the ACLU and or the NC and other of the anti-apartheid groups to report back on them. And he did voiceovers from the book, created sort of CCTV footage that was very grainy and acting out scenes from it, had the people in the scenes wearing his clothes, but the clothes were very much a kind of, background to the action. But then he did things like he used the thumbprint of one of the spies to create a polka dot pattern on a dress. It was just so layered. I learned so much, and the clothes looked great. And that to me was like, that was such a good way to do it.
That's important. You have to have a great product. And that's what I tell everybody. You can have the best narrative, the best PR, the best intention. If the product is not good and it's not the right price, then it will not work. And that's what I love about Tebe or other people, like, you know, people that upcycle. I mean, Duran Lanting, another one that I discovered in the British Fashion Council here, no, the British Council here 3 years ago. He is the best upcycler in the world. I mean, he does couture or with high fashion. And again, you know, why am I excited about him? Because he's honest. He never produced anything that were, you know, made from new, but because his collections are extraordinary. And that's what matters, you know. And Tebe is another one, you know. He's South African, he's black. He did the best film of Fashion Week in Paris, for sure, with a great product, because if the product is not good, don't do fashion because it won't sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I remember it's funny, you know, when we were all talking about star designers, and there was that whole debate over, like, do you hire star designers? Do you find the good number twos? You know, where do you go? Who has the power? Yes. You know, people were endlessly talking about Tom Ford. And at one point, Tom Ford said, look, you know, until I did that Gucci collection in, you know, whatever it was, 94, 95, you know, the sort of the velvet one, no one knew who I was. Like, the collection makes you the star.
Absolutely.
And it's true. And it's like, you know, and you live or die on that collection. Fashion has a very short memory.
And the collection, and the last collection can kill you and can kill your career, and then you go into oblivion.
You know,
or fast as you came into.
You know, or you do a lot of like bad stuff, and then you do something that is brilliant, and everyone's like, woohoo! You know, like, I've discovered you again.
Exactly. But sometimes it even happens with people that are a little bit more famous. I don't know if you agree, but I remember when Pierpaolo and Maria Grazia were together at Valentino, and we loved what they did. And, you know, I'm sure Arnaud thought it was Maria Grazia and he hired her. And then suddenly, when Pierpaolo was doing it alone, it became the brand that everybody was crying at, and the shows. I mean, I absolutely adore what he does, so I'm not in disagreement, but we never thought about him in the same way we thought about him now, and yet he was not.
I mean, do you remember when they first got the job, when they replaced Alessandra, right?
Yeah, Facchinetti was there for what, 1 season, 2 seasons?
She was there, I think, 2 seasons, and then they replaced them with Pierpaolo and Maria Grazia, and their first 2 or 3 seasons were really, like, not so good. And It did not look, it took them a while to, like, figure out what their thing was. You know, and it's interesting.
Well, give them time. And sometimes, like, I remember, what's his name? Oh, I know him well, at Oscar de la Renta, English boy.
Peter Copping.
Sorry?
Peter Copping.
Yeah, Peter. I mean, you can like it or not, but they didn't give him time. The guy did 2 collections and he was out. So is it fair? Is it right? I mean, are they commodities? But this is another discussion. But sometimes
I would love to know what you think about the sort of designer, like the ideal designer tenure is, because I remember talking to François-Henri Pinault when Alessandra, I guess not Alessandra, Frida, and what's his name?
Patrizio.
And Patrizio left, and he essentially said 10 years is enough. You know, and there certainly is an idea in corporate America that, like, 10 years as CEO is enough. You know, that after 10 years, people kind of run out of ideas and they stop being able to renew the company, and you need to kind of replace them with someone who has a different perspective. You know, now, of course, designers seem to stay between like 1 and 3 years, and then they decide they want to move on. And again, I remember talking to François-Henri, I think probably about Haiti.
They more often they're fired than they decide they want to.
Well, but both. I mean, he said that that it was really hard to get designers to, you know, to sign on for extended period of time, because they wanted to, like, reserve their own ability to leave too. And it has created a very weird situation, I think. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think first I want to say about the CEO, because I was there at the Frida and Patrizio time, and so, you know, I know the situation. In the Gucci group that was called like this at the time, we had people that we thought were very good to turn things around, and then people that were very good, or they were better to manage for the medium long term. And and that it was different jobs. Like I remember Mark Lee, when he took over Gucci really needed some turnaround. We used to call him Thatcherism, where it was not very popular, it was not very lovely, but it was really turning things around. But then wasn't the best for the long term, because it was difficult to it's very hard for me to now say things, but do you see what I'm trying to say? So with the designer, it was a little bit different, because I remember Frida was adored internally by Pinault and by Paulet, who was my boss at the time. Even whatever she was doing, she was adored, because they had decided that she was the right one, and someone decided. And I remember once I went to see a collection in Florence, and I had been a bit critical with her. I was hated. I almost got myself fired, because it was so strong, the support behind her, that even if I was an executive, I was in the executive committee, I wasn't allowed to say anything against. And that's to say that designer is not only about how great is their fashion for people like you, fashion critic, but it's how much it sells, and how big are the margins. And there are so many things that people out there don't know. And Frida sold. Frida was selling a lot. And I once said, it looks a little bit like an expensive Zara. Trust me, that didn't go down well. But it was selling. And Patricia's taken over, and they were becoming a couple, and it was untouchable until they were not. And then boom, out, one day from the other. So I don't know if I'm explaining what I'm trying to explain, but for people outside and people that are listening to this, they have to know that it's not always what you see, and it's not only about they tell you someone decided to move on and actually they fired him. No, but it's also why certain designers that I put myself a little bit into the critic thing, think, it's not, I don't understand, and yet they stay forever because they make money for the shareholders.
Well, that seems to be the narrative around Maria Grazia Dior, right? I think
to mention her, she's untouchable because it sells. But in a way, Vanessa, this is business. So a CEO or Arnaud or a Pinault would tell you, why not? That's why I'm here, to make money. And that's why when I was in the Gucci group, and this is a long time ago, but I would still say the same, when I was trying them at the time, it was the Christopher Kane, the Todd Lean, I was trying to have them buy these people. I remember François-Henri Pinault telling me, why? I want to buy Armani and Ferragamo. I want to be big. And I was like, no, because you don't have any fashion credibility. You don't have fashion kudos if you don't also have this brand that maybe, lose you a little bit of money, but they will inspire the rest. And then they did it afterwards, but it didn't go down well with the, whatever.
That's the genius of Rei Kawakubo, right? Because she manages to have her comme des garçons at the very top, where she can have a show where she literally says, I'm trying not to make clothes. And you're like, okay. And then she has this whole pyramid underneath her of, shirt and pants and t-shirts and, stuff that is fun and you can sell, and it pays for her staff. It pays for her, to be able to sponsor, designers like Junia and Kay from Noir. She and Adrian are a brilliant business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But I also think that when you own Armani and Ferragamo and Gucci at the time, now it's a little bit more directional, but you need to give me something that it's more directional, that bring fashion forward, that changes and now the young people, they ask for that more. So suddenly we are the Matthew Williamson and the Virgil and, but when I was there, it wasn't like this. I remember going to Alexander McQueen shows, Lee shows that were just amazing. And I had Paulet and Pinault calling me in the office the next day and said, what the heck? What was that? So, this was their understanding of fashion as you understand it. But God, I have talked about nothing I wanted to talk about, and it's almost an hour. But there was another thing I just wanted to touch quickly with you upon. monopoly or monopolium. I don't know how to say that. And I was thinking about Farfetch, Alibaba, and Richmond. And I guess everybody has read about this, union. And actually, I don't know if you were still there, but it was at the time that I was still part of the FT Business of Fashion summit. And Mr. Rupert,
you were there in 2015 where he got up and said, everyone come and join my big platform. And
I was there, got up on the stage and said, everybody join. And, he was saying, if we, the big groups, I'm going to not tell our audience, the big group don't get together, we will not go anywhere. And now, they have put money into Farfetch. I mean, it's just an avid genius. It's laughing all the way to the bank. And I'm happy because I have some shares, so they went up. They've done this big conglomerate, and there is Net-a-Porter nukes in there because they belong to Richmond in part. So what do you think about this huge thing that are going to monopolize the world? Are you pro, against? Are you afraid of them? Do you think they're right? What do you think?
I think when it comes to luxury e-commerce, because that's essentially what we're talking about, right? I think it's unclear what's going to happen. I think there is Amazon and there is Alibaba. And then in between are all these luxury platforms that, were created, the big ones, which are Yoox Net-a-Porter, Farfetch, but also, MatchesFashion.com and Moda Operandi, and there's things like List. And, I think it is, and the brands, I mean, there's 24/7, and what LVMH has tried to do, they're all still losing money. I think it's really hard to compete. And I do think what this deal, shows, what this sort of alliance between Farfetch and Alibaba and Richemont and Artemis shows perhaps is that there's a kind of shift toward the East, maybe, as in opposition to Amazon, which is also, trying to seize the moment and make more inroads into luxury. They opened their luxury stores with Oscar de la Renta, Altuzarra, and Roland Mouret. They created stores for the British Fashion Council and the Council of Fashion Designers of America during the pandemic to help young designers. So, they have this kind of enhanced credibility with luxury they didn't have before. And, that is a big elephant. So as I don't know if you remember Scott Galloway, but Scott Galloway, he's a technology watcher and entrepreneur who used to come to conferences also. He, he said sometimes you team up with your rivals because they are not your enemy. And essentially he sees this as the Axis versus the Allies.
Well, and I hear what's behind Rupert head, and we heard him saying it publicly and getting, all the PR people in the world saying, oh my God, what did he say? And the phone ringing. And I understand also that there is this need to prepare against Amazon, who's, desperately trying to get into luxury and fashion, all of that. But I'm really scared about these big things that are going to monopolize the business, like we're seeing what's happening with social media. I think we're going against them. I mean, people are going to make money. Don't get me wrong. I'm just being a little bit moralistic here or ethical. I don't know. It scares me a little bit. It scares me. But
I think this is one we're going to have to wait and see how it plays out a little bit.
Yeah. Listen, just 3 minutes because we're going to go outside of the, acceptance for a video. But there's still one thing that I would like to ask you that came in from someone outside. What is of value in creation? So this is completely different and we're not talking about business, but to someone like you who's a fashion critic, what do you value in new collection, in creation?
I think it's something that you already talked about. It's a designer that has a point of view. The single most important thing, I think, for any designer, big or small, is having your own thing. It's like knowing what your thing is, and it's not the thing the other guy does, and it's not something that's, that guy over there does. It's the thing that you stand for. It's what you bring to the conversation, how you see things, and that is what makes something compelling and special and worth coming back to. And it is really hard to find. It's what writers call voice, right? It's what's your voice? And for a designer, it's, what's your silhouette? Your silhouette's your voice. Your print is your voice.
And I couldn't agree more. And I would add to this say that one of the reasons why it's so hard to find, as you just said, it's because of the fact that these young people are bombarded by images. They live on screens, and we all do. And so content is so accessible that it's very hard to find your voice. But I usually tell my students, don't do it. If you don't have an idea that it's original and you strongly believe in it to the point that you're going to impose it to the world, don't do it. Go and work for someone else, find a different route, but don't do it. So that's what would be my advice.
I mean, it's funny because a lot of people talk about Asdin Alaya when they talk about, a designer they want to be like, or, that they kind of, who had this sort of perfect design world. And that is someone who absolutely had a voice, which he was dedicated to, to the exclusion of everything else. But, he spent a huge amount of time kind of in the wilderness. He was really big in the 80s, right? And then the 90s came, and he was not a 90s designer. It was not his thing. But he was like, this is my voice, and I am sticking to it. And because of that, he spent probably 10, 15 years being kind of on the outskirts of fashion before we came back round to him and started understanding that someone who had that consistency and belief in their own vision, had sort of enormous value. But it's like, it is tough. It is, and you have to have a huge ego and real commitment to what you think, because, fashion, things go in and out, and sticking to it is the toughest thing.
Yeah, I think this is a great note to end this discussion. I would go on and on and on, but I can't. But thank you very much. I hope that people enjoy it as much as I did, and I hope to see you soon in real life.
Yeah, me too. Nice to see you, Mimma. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. Bye.
Yes.